Music. I am deeply equipped and proficient to carry out evil. Here are some disturbing facts about the most evil people in history. Tsar Nicholas II. Good rulers learn how to let go of the past and change with the times. But Tsar Nicholas II was not one of them. At a time when his country was going through major social and political change, he stubbornly held on to the old ways and refused any kind of reform. He also sucked as a military strategist and didn't really care much about what was good for the people. So it was expected that something would give. His ineptness was one of the causes of the Russian Revolution, and the 300-year rule of the Romanov dynasty came to an end with his execution in 1918. Ferdinand I. Ferdinand I of Naples governed by oppression, which led to a revolt amongst the nobility. He had zero compassion for his defeated enemies, and after falsely promising them amnesty, he had them murdered instead. After their murders, he would have them mummified and added to his museum of mummies dressed in their clothes. If he thought anyone was plotting against him, he'd simply take them on a casual tour of the museum, which was totally morbid but effective. Rana Valona. Rana Valona I of Madagascar kept her country free from British rule, but was so ruthless that she managed to cut the country's population in half. Instead of collecting taxes, she imposed periods of forced labor on her subjects. She also didn't really care who died giving her what she wanted, and once she demanded that a road be built before her eyes for her and her hunting party, an estimated 10,000 subjects died building it. Not surprisingly, there were several plots to kill her, and at least one attempt at a coup, but this only drove her to deeper paranoia. Not a good thing when you're already ruthless. Emperor Shunji. During his reign, Emperor Shunji of China achieved unification by destroying the country's education system and basically working his subjects until they dropped. In a move straight out of 1984, he followed principles that included speaking in opposites, issuing orders that made no sense, and behaving in contraries. He also distrusted anyone with an education, and not only burned books, but buried several hundred scholars alive. Everything he thought he accomplished fell apart less than a decade after his death, so he wasn't nearly as smart as he thought. King John. Seldom has there been a ruler so bad that no future ruler has ever taken the name, but King John, brother of Richard the Lionheart, was 100% that guy. While Richard was away on crusade, John was supposed to babysit the kingdom, but he did far more than just that. He had his nephew Arthur murdered to remove his most likely competition for the throne, and then started a war with France, which he lost. Centuries later, the Brits still hadn't forgiven him for being an evil dunce. Murad Quasern. Murad IV, Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, was born during a particularly violent period for his kingdom. Being under perpetual attack can be stressful, even for the most seasoned leader, but Murad took it all in stride and did as the Romans do, using the violence to his advantage. During his reign, he killed his siblings, banned smoking and coffee, and made sure to hang or impale anyone who defied him. And that was just for starters. He had his corrupt advisors strangled to death in his presence, executed a bunch of high-ranking military officials, and he had the head of the Islamic Supreme Court assassinated. All in all, he was one scary dude that you were better off not to mess with. Emperor Commodus. Emperor Commodus of Rome was not particularly beloved by his people. Still, he attempted to play nice inside the public arena, but in his private fights, he wasn't so nice. He ordered wounded soldiers and ordinary cripples into the arena to be slain, and he slaughtered exotic animals, much to the horror of the Romans. Predictably, his outlandish behavior was too brutal, even for Rome, and he was eventually assassinated. King Leopold. King Leopold of Belgium, recently inserted into the Legend of Tarzan film, is best known for creating the Congo Free State, which was a project to extract rubber and ivory from the Congo region in Africa. Under the pretense of missionary work, for 2 decades, he enslaved the people of Congo, killing and torturing between 8 and 12 million people in the late 1800s. Thanks to his exploitation of the Congolese people, he was at one time believed to be the richest man in the world, with a personal fortune between $100 and $500 million. Nero. Roman leader Nero enjoyed torturing Christians, and even blamed the Great Fire of Rome, which some claim Nero started, on Christians. Nero murdered his own mother, his first wife, and his second wife. After numerous problems attempting to rebuild Rome, Nero died by suicide in 68 A.D. Tiberius. The stepson of the great Emperor Augustus, Tiberius was initially hailed as a great Roman general. However, when he became emperor, Tiberius was reported to have become deeply bitter due to personal tragedies and the strain of being the emperor. A Roman writer alleged that Tiberius engaged in such actions as child sex abuse and paranoid acts of cruelty. As people sought to climb the ladder and seize power for themselves, Tiberius reacted with increased paranoia and hostility, launching treason trials which resulted in multiple executions. Charles VI. Charles VI of France's first recorded incident of mental illness happened in 1392. A friend of his was nearly murdered, but escaped with his life. However, Charles was insistent on raiding Brittany, where the would-be murderer was being sheltered. Seemingly in the grips of a fever, Charles was furious at the slow pace of the military expedition he was leading. One day during the trip, a spear accidentally clanged loudly against someone's helmet, which caused Charles to draw his sword, scream that he was being betrayed, and attack his own company. He was ultimately subdued and fell into a faint, but not before he'd killed several men. It's no wonder he became known as Charles the Mad. Elizabeth Bathory. Countess Elizabeth Bathory of Hungary was nicknamed the Bloody Countess for being the world's worst female serial killer. She was believed to have bathed in the blood of the hundreds of servant girls she tortured and killed, and she was reputed to be a vampire, a lesbian, and a witch. She got away with it for so long because of her immense wealth, even the king owed her money. In 1610, Bathory was arrested along with her favorite servants and intimates, who were thought to be accomplices to her crimes. Most of them were put to death, but because of her family's social standing, Bathory herself couldn't be executed. Instead, she was locked up in a room with walled-up windows inside a castle, where she remained until her death in 1614. Joseph Mengele. Joseph Mengele was a physician at the notorious Auschwitz concentration camp during the Holocaust. He sent hundreds of thousands of people to their death via gas chambers, but he is most notoriously known for performing horrible experiments on prisoners with no regard for health and safety or the suffering of the patients. He had a disturbing interest in twins, dwarves, and people with other abnormalities. Madame Delphine Lalaurie. Madame Delphine Lalaurie was an influential French Creole woman, married to Dr. Louis Lalaurie. However, despite their grand home and lavish affairs, Madame Lalaurie had a sinister secret. She was extremely cruel to the slaves working within her house. She enjoyed murdering her slaves and having the bodies buried in shallow graves around the house. It wasn't until a terrible house fire in the Lalaurie mansion that outsiders finally made the grisly discovery of tortured slaves hidden away in the attic, scattered human body parts, and other unspeakable conditions. This story was recently brought to life by actress Kathy Bates, who played Lalaurie in American horror story Coven. Maximilien Robespierre. Maximilien Robespierre was the leader in the French Revolution, but has gone down in history for his leadership during a time known as the Reign of Terror. Starting out as a bourgeois lawyer and a working-class sympathizer, he became ruthless during the French Revolution and had anyone he suspected of treason and political rivals sentenced to death by the guillotine. Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan was a fearsome leader of the Mongols, known for destroying everything in sight. Genghis ruled as the emperor of the Mongol Empire from 1206 until his death in 1227. Upward of 40 million people were killed under Khan's rule, as his military campaigns often sought to completely eliminate entire civilian populations. Ironically, Genghis Khan's belief that he couldn't spill blood made him even crueler, because rather than just stabbing them or cutting their heads off, he had to come up with other ways to kill them. Now you might think that breaking their necks or choking would have done the trick, but this was pretty rare. His favorite method involved piling them under a large board, and then he and his nobles would eat dinner on top of the board until they were all crushed to death. Life in Mongolia when Genghis was young was not a piece of cake, to say the least. After his father's death, Genghis's family lived in poverty, and Genghis's half-brother Begtar was beginning to eye up Genghis's mother as a potential wife. Basically, Begtar was looking for ways to flex his power as the oldest boy in the family. This didn't sit well with Genghis, and when he was 10, he ended up murdering his brother on a hunting excursion with the help of another brother. Tamerlane the Great. If you think Genghis Khan was evil, you shouldn't have met his possible descendant Tamerlane the Great. During his 40-year reign, he tried his hardest to emulate Khan, destroying cities, killing tens of thousands, and sending spies into the enemy camp to spread rumors about his vicious exploits. In Baghdad, he is said to have beheaded 90,000 people and built towers out of their rotting skulls. Tamerlane also had a pretty good handle on the most brutal methods of torture, and he didn't hesitate to skin people alive for not accepting Islam. Attila the Hun. Attila the Hun was such a fearsome leader that there were no survivors' accounts of his appearance. Attila was so passionate about invading other countries that on his way to gather his bride, he made a quick stop in Rome to destroy it. Attila became known amongst the Romans as the Scourge of God for attacking and looting the empire. Tomás de Torquemada. Born in Spain in 1420, the Dominican priest, known as Tomás de Torquemada, became a notorious figure for his cruelty. While serving as the Inquisitor General of the Spanish Inquisition, after being appointed by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, he had 2,000 people burned alive and over 17,000 mutilated. His leadership became synonymous with barbaric torture and merciless cruelty. Mao Zedong. Over 45 million people died under the leadership of Mao Zedong. The leader and founder of the People's Republic of China sought to protect China from foreign influence and grow China's agricultural and industrial power through a program called the Great Leap Forward. Unfortunately, this initiative was a huge failure that caused widespread famine and economic collapse. Mao's government tried to cover up the failure. Anyone who spoke out against the program was labeled a right opportunist and would be arrested or killed. Ivan the Terrible. Ivan the Terrible was the first Tsar of Russia. He was made Grand Prince of Moscow in 1533 and reigned over all of Russia until 1584. After the death of his first wife, he became erratic and paranoid. Ivan suspected that the noblemen of the wealthy city of Novgorod caused the deaths of his mother and wife, and had the city along with its people destroyed. Ivan even killed his own son after his son had expressed discontent with his military failures. In a fit of rage, Ivan hit his son on the temple and killed him. In one of the most famous incidents of a mad monarch, Ivan the Terrible was once seized with a fit of such rage that he assaulted his pregnant daughter-in-law, causing her to miscarry. While his son understandably confronted his father, Ivan struck his son with a scepter, killing him. Ivan's mental breakdown as he lamented this action has famously been captured in a haunting painting by Ilya Repin, Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler is one of the most notorious evil men in human history. Once a young man seeking to become an artist, he later ended up being a dictator in the face of Germany's Nazi Party in the 1930s and during World War II. Hitler was responsible for the infamous Final Solution, which led to the creation of death camps where millions were murdered. As Allied forces advanced into Germany towards the end of World War II, he hid in a bunker where he died by suicide on April 30th, 1945. Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin was born in 1878 and served as a dictator of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics from 1929 until 1953. Under his rule, millions of citizens were forced into labor camps and were brutally executed. Stalin's forced collectivization of farms led to millions of farmers being shot or exiled, and a widespread famine, which led to many deaths. Hamilton Howard Fish. American serial killer Hamilton Howard Albert Fish was also known as the Gray Man, the Brooklyn Vampire, and the Boogeyman. Even though he married and conceived 6 children, Fish had a dark side to him. He developed a fondness for cannibalism and sadistic behavior. It was believed that the Boogeyman had up to 9 victims, most being young children. He was executed via the electric chair in 1936 at Sing Sing Prison in New York. Charles Manson. The notorious cult leader Charles Manson had a troubled and difficult youth. Once he was forced to wear a dress in kindergarten when family discovered he cried in class. He committed his first crime stealing money from a grocery store at 12. Manson was strongly influenced by Scientology and the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, which helped him shape his cult and lure followers. Charles Manson and the Manson family were known for the gruesome murder of actress Sharon Tate and other Hollywood denizens. Manson was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder for the deaths of 7 people. Miyuki Ishikawa. Miyuki Ishikawa lived a pretty normal life until she received the nickname of Demon Midwife. Miyuki was born in 1897 in Japan and later worked as a hospital director and midwife. In the 1940s, she began murdering infants from poor, disadvantaged families via neglect, citing that she was doing the children and their struggling families a service. The demon midwife was accused of 103 deaths and sentenced to 8 years in prison for her crimes, but it is believed that over 200 children died under her direction. Pol Pot. The Cambodian head of state and dictator Pol Pot was the leader of the Khmer Rouge regime. More than 1 million people were killed thanks to exhaustion from overwork, starvation, or execution between 1975 and 1979. Pot was notorious for directing executioners to not waste bullets, so battery acid, bludgeoning with objects, and other tactics were used to execute prisoners. The mass graves, as people were commanded to dig, were known as the killing fields. Pot was arrested for his crimes in 1997 and died while under house arrest on April 15, 1998. Caligula? Caligula was notorious for his leadership of the Roman Empire. He brought Rome to the brink of revolution by wastefully spending and killing anyone who stood in his way. He even deemed himself God and had a statue of himself erected for people to worship. He also had a malevolent sense of humor. Once at a dinner party, he reportedly burst into laughter. When people asked to explain the reason for his laughter, he replied, "I've just thought that I've only to give the word, and you'll all have your throats cut." Rasputin. When traditional medicine failed the Tsarina Alexandra of Russia's son, she turned to a Russian mystic by the name of Rasputin. As Rasputin's influence over the Romanovs, and especially Alexandra, grew, so did the rumors that Alexandra was having an affair with the mysterious man. He also grew disturbingly close to the Tsarina's daughters, who wore amulets containing his picture. The wicked influence of Rasputin is thought to be one of the factors that led to the eventual downfall of the Romanovs. King Herod. King Herod the Great is definitely not remembered as much for his greatness as for being the evil king who wanted to slaughter the baby Jesus in Christian tales. Another tale of his brutality? After accusing his wife of adultery and having her executed, King Herod had her body preserved in honey and continued to perform disturbing acts with it for years afterward. Following a reign of 37 years, he died a terribly painful death from a disease that rotted his body and gave him worms. Bloody Mary. Mary was Henry VIII's firstborn living child, but the volatile king soon turned on her, exiling her and her mother from court. And years later, she reaped her bloody revenge. Although Henry denounced Catholicism in order to divorce Mary's mother, Mary herself remained a devout Catholic. When she took the throne, she reinstated Catholicism on pain of a fiery death. During her short 5-year rule, she burned over 280 dissenters, earning her the name Bloody Mary. Philip II. Philip II of Macedon was father to Alexander the Great and a fearful warrior in his own right. During his years of campaigning, Philip famously sent a threatening message to the city of Sparta. He declared that if he entered their land, he would raze Sparta to the ground and enslave the Spartans forever. The Spartans sent back just one word as a reply. If Philip backed down and his mastery over the Greeks exempted Sparta as the only place that withstood him. Music. Thanks for watching History Exposé. If you love uncovering the best stories in history, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring with us. Don't forget to visit our main page Factinate for more incredible facts about everything.